Welcome to another edition of Let's Fix a Thing. Today we're going to be changing out the oil filter housing gasket on a 2005 330 Ci, but more or less the same procedure will apply to any E46 chassis BMW, at least with the 6-cylinder. So it's a common leak. It might look like an oil pan leak when you're at the bottom of the engine, but trace it up to the top and you'll see that it actually comes behind the back of the oil filter housing. And that's where, if you see oil up there, 90% of the time it's going to be the gasket for the oil filter housing that's going to leak. I haven't done it before, but it doesn't look like too hard a job. You take the air box out of the way, you take the alternator out of the way, and then you take this off. While I'm in there, I'm going to do some of these CCV pipes because if I ever have to do that, I'm going to have to do the same exact job plus that. And once you take these things out, it's a 2-second job. I might as well do it while I'm in there. First things first, crack the cap on the oil fill and leave an air gap. And then loosen your oil filter housing cap to the point that air comes through. What I like to do is I kind of loosen it, and then when I get to a point that I can wiggle it, I hold that back. You'll hear the air suck in. You'll hear the oil dribble down. Once it's done that for a little while, I loosen it all the way. That drains the oil back into the pan, so you don't have to drain the engine of its oil just to replace this gasket. I cap this back up. It doesn't matter if you do or don't, but I do it because now I no longer need the air pressure and keeps it from stuff from falling in there. So once you've let that drain back into the pan, you're going to go ahead and remove the air filter box, which I've already taken them out, but there's clips here that hold the front of the snorkel in place. And what you want, if you try to use a flathead, you are going to break those clips. You need one of these guys. This is a, if it'll ever focus, it's a PB Swiss PB671. It's made for this purpose. All kinds of brands make these. It doesn't have to be PB Swiss, but the key is having that fork. That puts pressure on both sides, on 3 sides, and the clips never break. If you use one of these, they always break with a flathead. So pop these 3 clips out. And then there is these 2 bolts here on the air filter housing. It's helpful, makes it easier if you undo the snorkel here, take the mass airflow sensor out, and you gotta lift, come on now. You gotta lift this tab up to do it. You lift the tab up and then the connector comes out. And then you can lift out this whole airbox housing. So I'll do that and I'll be back. Okay, a couple of quick things. When you take the airbox out, to make the angle work, you're gonna have to take this piece off separately, and then you can get the angle you need for this, which goes behind the headlight to clear. This has foam around it. At this point, these cars are old enough, this foam is gonna break when you pull these out. The only way to get the foam is to buy this piece. It's pretty cheap. I don't remember exactly how much, but it wasn't much. Go ahead and do it. Keep water from getting in there. Keep trash from getting in there. It's just, you know, whatever it was, 20 bucks or 30 bucks or something. You get a new piece up front. Worth your time. Second thing, I said you pull out the air filter housing, you pull out the alternator, and you pull off the oil filter housing. You could probably do it that way. Go ahead and pull this off too. By the way, the bolts that held on the air filter housing were 10 millimeter. These look like they're probably bigger. Let's go ahead and find out. Those are probably 12s or 13s. I'm not a BMW land guy. It's not like Mercedes where I know the few sizes they use. Yeah, those are 13s. So you could probably do it without taking this off. I'm not going to need to empty the hoses or drain it or anything, but you might as well take it off just to give yourself a little wiggle room. All right. So we've got all that out. Next step is going to be removing the alternator. And it's all pretty straightforward, but I'll be back in a second when I have the official instructions. Okay, so removing the alternator. First, we're going to undo the negative terminal of the battery. Then you've got to undo the belts first. Down there, somehow, there you go. There you go. There is an ACE air conditioner belt. You're going to have to pull that off. And then we're going to have to pull off the main belt. Since we're not changing the belt, at this time. You got to mark the direction that it goes in. That way it has to go back in the same direction that it's been going because it kind of wears in a certain pattern. But first things first, we are going to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery, which is back in the trunk. I will admit I have in the past in my life done alternators without disconnecting the negative terminal. That is not smart. Oh man, that's right, I'm doing sheetrocking. That's a project for later today, plaster work. But, well, let me say this, it is not smart to do anything with the alternator without disconnecting the battery. So now that I'm older and wiser, I always disconnect the battery. I'm going to empty the trunk. Battery's behind here. You got to lift the bottom tray up. There are 2 clips, and then that comes out, and the battery's back there. All right, I'll be back when that's done. So we're here under the car at the AC belt, which you got to remove to be able to remove the alternator belt. What you do is it needs a T60 torque socket, and you put it in your ratchet. I wish I had a 3/8 inch drive T60 because that is a tight fit. I actually have to kind of put it next to the hole and then angle it in. I guess, and then you go in the direction of tightening, and I guess if your belt were newer, it wouldn't be as hard to get it in. Actually, either way, you're still hitting the shroud, but it's very tight clearance, but you can do it. You just got to angle it in there. And then when you put it in direction, let me focus. Put it in a direction like you're tightening, and that'll loosen the belt, and you just pull it off. And again, make sure if you're using the belt, make sure you're going in the same direction. There's apparently other versions where it's a hydraulic ram. You just use a pry bar or your hand instead of a T60 Torx, and you just compress it. Congratulations, you are now ready to remove the alternator belt. That pulley, the lower one, I can't quite reach it, but the lower one down there is the idler for the alternator. And when you go to your car, it'll have this cover on it, right in the center, and it'll look smooth at the front. Also, it's helpful to notice the vanes back there are part of the pulley. The cap is just the center smooth part, smooth one, it's not dirty. I got it off using, they say you can use a flathead. That wasn't working for me. I was using, if it'll focus, there we go. I was using a tool like this, actually not like this, to kind of get in the top and pull it. You get in the top and then pull it. Flathead people managed to make it work. I couldn't. Once you do that, inside there is an 8mm Allen bolt. And again, you'll take it in the direction of tightening to take up the slat, to loosen the tension so you can pull the belt off. And again, mark the direction of your belt because it's got to be the same if you're reusing it. Okay, the belt's off, and now you have to disconnect the electrical connections to the alternator. First, you have this one here. And what you're going to do, you see that little tab there? This is only true on the later models. I think it's a different kind of connectors. On the earlier, there's a bigger connector here, and it uses a screw. This one, you push that down, and it comes off. It might be tight when you first do it. And you undo this 17mm to get the battery lead out. If you can see it right there, it's a 17mm bolt. Okay, one last step here. If you have a version that has a second idler pulley on the alternator, like this, you gotta pull that cap off, and we're gonna go back to that hook tool. And we're gonna put that hook tool on one of those grooves to get that cap off. And then behind there is a screw, and you unscrew it. And I believe then you're done with the alternator. I said there's a screw holding it on. It's actually a 16mm bolt, which is a very uncommon size, but there you have it. Great, so you've got that idler off, and by the way, you're going to need a 16mm wrench as well as a socket because the bolt comes way out and it's going to hit the fan shroud long before you can get your socket wrench out. So use an open end wrench or a box end wrench, get it that way. Note when you take this out, it's got an installation notch right there. You're going to have to line that up with the corresponding hole when you put it back. And at this point, you're almost done. Man, I gotta clean this garage up. I just moved into the place and I'm working on it. It's kind of a construction site, so sorry about that. But at this point, you're almost done, but there is, way down there, one more bolt, and you can see it just above that other pulley. is I believe a 15. It might be a 16. You undo that bolt and your alternator comes out. So I'll see you when the alternator's out. Okay, a couple of noteworthy things here. One, you can see how the alternator mounts in there. And where is it? How have I lost this? Okay, there. Both ends are threaded on the bottom one. You see how there's a break in the middle, and then there's two sides to it. Both are threaded, so you think you're free, and then you're not. It really is only 2 bolts. Mine did not want to come out after moving the 2 bolts. So I rocked it towards the driver's side of the car to kind of break its hold. Be careful not to break your coolant line there. I rocked it towards the driver's side of this car to break its hold, and now here we are. There are 6 bolts holding on the oil filter housing, and you see they're all across from each other, and you can't see the top right one because it's behind that electrical connector. Undo the connector, it has a spring clamp holding it on, and then start undoing those bolts. Okay, I said undo the electrical connector and then undo those 6 bolts. There's actually 2 electrical connectors, another electrical connectors are on the back side. Easy to see, same spring clamp, just push down the metal, pull it off. And then also importantly, disconnect your Vanos line. I'm disconnecting it at the front. It'd probably be easier to do it at the back as far as when actually you're moving the whole unit when you undo the rest of the bolts. The reason I'm doing mine at the front is there are washers on it that this can't focus on. There you go. I didn't buy the washers because I didn't think of this. If it does leak, it'll be a lot easier to put new washers on this side than on the back side. Alright, so here you can see where the seal is supposed to mate. You can see the giant mess being made behind it and under it. The seal itself, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that or not. Focus. The seal itself stays in a channel in the oil filter housing there. So I didn't take the whole oil filter housing out of the car because it has a hose attached to it. It's not worth disconnecting, but it does just kind of, you can just kind of shift it over. There's plenty of room to work with what you need. So clean all that up and replace that gasket and put it back together and you're done.